And I think we are very much constrained by words. We say something, and it's never really enough. I mean, it never really completely holds what we feel. That's probably why I'm an artist and not a writer.
Hi, Hadassa. We're here in Mamuta at this incredible exhibition that you've done with Ariel Vardi. Tell us a little bit about this.
A few years ago, I was lucky enough to meet Ada Vardi, a wonderful designer, and she saw my work and said, "You have to meet my father." I found myself walking into a little room that was just a few streets from where I actually live, and met Ariel Vardi, who's an incredible artist. He's now 93. And he, for the last 30 years, has been printing dozens and dozens of books, making every letter of the alphabet by himself, carving each letter. Each book took a year and a half. The books are bound in dirt or sand or stone. And I remember sitting in that room feeling like my soul belongs here. I completely understand this language of the books that were made here. And we started a conversation between us about language and the love of language and the way kind of language functions in our body. Does language have to be written? Is it only a taste? Is it only a sound? And this exhibition is kind of this journey. And it felt crucial to get these incredible books out in the world and have him speak about them and about what it means to go back in time and recreate the printing press and kind of recreate what is making books, what is making letters to make books. And about a year in, I remember I was sitting in a little yard of his home, and I was telling them about a piece that I have in the Tel Aviv Museum that is all about Morse code, because I'm extremely occupied with language. And his wife said, "You have to tell her about your Morse code thing." And apparently in the 40s, Ariel Vardi used to be on illegal ships sending Morse code messages. And apparently his wife told me when I was sitting in the courtyard 50 years later with them, when he thinks something, he kind of sends the message to himself. Like he just kind of taps, his fingers tap the Morse code. And this idea of him sending these messages of his thoughts to himself all these years. I mean, the way he carries Morse code with him throughout his life, really beautiful and poetic. And at that moment I said, we are going to translate your books to Morse code, and we're going to do together a Morse version of Sefer Yonah, of Tehillim Kuf Daled. We were thinking about books that have kind of a depth in them. Somebody is calling from inside somewhere that is either a physical deep place like Jonah inside the whale, or kind of the depth of where life takes us sometimes. We were thinking about how the messages would call from one room to another.
It's such an incredible sensory experience to be in this exhibition. And the way that you've captured him and his hand and his tapping and the sound alongside his books that he created by hand is really just incredible. And when you took me through the exhibition, the association that I had was an amazing sugya in Masechet Megillah, which is really talking about what can and cannot be either translated or written in a different language. And I want to start with the Mishna, Chet Amud Bet, Ein bein sparim letfilin umezuzot, ela shehasfarim nichtavim b'chol lashon, utfilin umezuzot inam nechtavot, ela ashurit. So the only difference between tefillin, mezuzot, and a Torah, or we're not sure if it means Sifrei Torah, or it just means books or scrolls, let's say for our purposes, can be written in any language, and tefillin and mezuzot can only be written in Ashurit. It means Hebrew typeface, but it's interesting to note that Hebrew was a language without a script, and Ashurit was a script without a language, and they kind of found each other, but it means conventional contemporary Hebrew. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af basfarim lo tiru sheyichtuvu ele Yavanit. That we have this dissent opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that the only other language that you can write Sfarim is in Greek. I love this Mishnah because I think that it's trying to figure out how much of language is essential to the thing that it is connected to. In other words, are tefillin still tefillin if they were to be written in a different language? And they're saying no. Are mezuzot but books or scrolls? In fact, we know that there were Jewish communities like in Alexandria that wrote Sifrei Torah in Greek. So why the different status for books? And the sugya goes on and it tells, it's a Talmudic retelling in the Gemara of the original translation of the Torah, which is why I think it's interesting that they associated that scene with this Mishnah. It's talking about the Septuagint, Targum HaShivim, and the miraculous way in which they put all 70 translators in a different room and they all translated it exactly the same. So there seems to be this sense of the Ruach HaKodesh, of some kind of a Holy Spirit is involved in this first translation of the Torah. What do you make of this Mishnah and the excerpts of Gemara?
I think very much about language as kind of this three-dimensional material. It creates the world. And I think we are very much constrained by words. We say something, and it's never really enough. I mean, it never really completely holds what we feel, and also it holds things that we possibly don't mean for it to. The Hebrew language is containing all of that creation, all of those prophecies, all of those blessings, inner blessings that are held within words. There's something very explosive about that. There's something very scary about that. How can it ever carry over to a different language? Will it always be able to carry all the blessings and all the prophecies and all the creations that kind of are held within words? That's probably why I'm an artist and not a writer. If I think about my ability to speak, I'm really still learning the letter Aleph. I am definitely not into Bet yet, not even like proficient in saying Aleph yet. I love this Mishnah, and it speaks of the limitations of language and how do you name your child and give it all the blessings that you want within that name? How do you say a blessing in the morning? How do you pray for the safety of your family and get your words exact to reach the kind of a godly presence? And I find a lot of comfort in art because it allows for this abstract complexity. For instance, when Ariel Vardi reads Sefer Yonah in Morris, maybe it's closer to Yonah, the kind of the real essence of Yonah, of that journey that has so much heartbreak and desperate prayer. Maybe it holds it more than the words. Maybe it holds it more than our ability to understand the words today. We are speaking in a very specific time where we are remembering things about what it means to be Jewish that we possibly chose to forget, and also where the differences between Jewish people have been so painful. And so I'm thinking about Shivim Panim LeTorah, but if you think about it in terms of time, of kind of an evolution, of that each phase is one interpretation and the next one would come in a different time, as opposed to different translations. It's kind of how time gives us a new translation.
I think that's really beautiful. It's not that the idea of 70 perspectives somehow contradicts or stands in opposition to the idea of 70 translators translating it in a unified way. That unified way relies upon different frames for looking at that text at different moments in time.
Yeah.
I love this idea, specifically at this moment in Jewish life, this moment in Israel, after it seemed like we were on the brink of a civil war. We're experiencing so much unity and so much chesed, loving kindness and cooperation, and we're feeling that throughout the Jewish world, and that there's something about this project of translation, this original project of translating the Torah for the world was a source of unity for us, that's part of what emerges from this text. I love that. Just bring us back to this project, to this exhibit.
I'll say something about what it means to open an exhibition. This exhibition was supposed to open to the public on October 12th. It wasn't ready, and it felt for the first couple of weeks like maybe art is meaningless. Maybe everything is meaningless. What has meaning? Who are we, and kind of are we just all positioned in our survival mode? And Leah, the director of this incredible institution, called us in. She said, let's just put it together. Maybe it's never going to open to the public. And we came in feeling like there's no meaning, like we're playing make-believe. What are we doing? We're putting an exhibition together when it's the end of the world. And something incredible happened when we worked for a few hours in kind of great sadness and frustration and fear. And then there's always this point in an art piece. Sometimes you have to work 3 years in order to have like these 10 minutes of grace where suddenly the work comes to life and it begins to speak back to you, kind of like a child. And suddenly we realized that this exhibition that was all about kind of breaking books and letters into their very foundation of just like, how do you make the letter Aleph? Ariel Wardi's cut and made each letter by hand for the books that he printed. That is kind of what we need to do now, going back to our very basics of things we thought we forgot, just kind of really learning how to say the alphabet from the beginning, and then maybe we'll remember who we are and where we need to go. And the other thing is that all this Morse code is a language of war. And Ariel Vardi constantly said, Morse for me is a war. And then it was echoing throughout the space, this kind of calls for help from this kind of cave that we're in. And we realized that this exhibition, which kind of came from a very place of wanting to show his work, and this, all these ideas became this moment of calling for help, calling for some meaning. And then we all came out of that day of installation. For a minute, we remembered who we were before October 7th. I think that these past few weeks have been weeks of pain and agony, and they have been dark weeks for our people. And for me personally, those moments of grace, moments of learning, moments of kind of going through emotions that have a different kind of tefillah in them. And suddenly there was memory of who we are, of where we need to go, even if it's just 2 steps, kind of gives this map of what's ahead.
I love that. And I was thinking about what you just said about Ariel saying that Morse code is a language of war, that you've helped him through this exhibition to transform a language of war into a language of public reading, of Sefer Yonah, and of a chapter of Psalms. And it's very powerful. And I'm thinking about this discussion in the Gemara, in which Greek is, in a certain way, transformed from the language of the enemy, the language of the cultural other, into a language that is also a language of Torah. And I think there's something about the transformation of language that happens through translation that's at play in this exhibit and also in the Gemara itself.
I feel really lucky to do that. I also feel very lucky to do it today with this, throughout this learning.
Me too.
Yeah.
So, thank you.